Now, the coronavirus pandemic has undoubtedly had a huge impact on all aspects of lives. Across the globe, economies shut down, some healthcare systems are on the verge of collapse, while many lost their livelihoods and even their lives. While countries rebuild in the face of the outbreak, the role of leadership has also been a highlight in ensuring proper guidance during this period. To discuss the necessity of resilient leadership is former public protector and now professor at law at the Stellenbosch University, Thuli Madonsela, joins me now. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time, Professor Madonsela. It has been a difficult year, an unprecedented year, which really needed all minds to come together to steer the country forward and really keep going through a difficult time. What did you make of the key factors when it comes to leadership during a time like this?
Good morning, and thank you for the privilege. It was a difficult year, and as I said in my article in the Financial Mail, it was a paradoxical year in that those who were able to lead in such a way that they were able to dance with change, they were agile in catching up with changes and resilient, were able to move on, and some of them even did better than previous years. But the majority were caught off guard and were not able to be agile, resilient, and did not have the kind of grit to withstand the storms that came with the lockdown in particular. Yes, COVID-19 itself was a huge challenge, but if we talk about 40% of small and medium enterprises having died, it was because of the lockdown rules, which I pass no judgment on the rules themselves, but I think there are lessons about how we do things.
You also emphasize in your article that you have a feeling that COVID-19 is not the last pandemic or turbulence we will see, even in this decade. Just give us more clarity on what you mean by that and how you see the lessons that we've learned this year steering us forward for future turbulences.
By all accounts, the century that we've just entered, or rather not the century, the decade we've just entered, promises to be full of turbulence. Firstly, we already were experiencing turbulences because of the fourth industrial revolution disruptions. Every given day, somebody invents technology or some innovation that disrupts life as we know it, and we're always playing catch up. And when it comes to pandemics, because we've become a globalized village and we mix very frequently, there are indications, if you read the journal Lancet, among others, that we're likely to have other pandemics. Even this one, it seems that it is already mutating. And therefore, we need to be on guard. We don't have to be scared all the time. But it seems to me that if we're going to move forward resiliently, we need leadership that is agile to any changes that may come.
I want us to expand this conversation on the aspects of leadership that you speak of. I'd ask you for you to stay put for us as we will continue this discussion with Professor Thuli Madonsela. Professor Madonsela, before we took our break, you touched on leadership and you expand even further in your article when you say we need leadership that is agile, resilient in dealing with radical uncertainty. We need leaders who can dance with change while empowering those under them to do the same. I mean, we saw the impact of leadership during this year, perhaps watching it with closer scrutiny, especially as we looked at the PPE corruption, fraud, and the allegations and the work of the ANC Integrity Commission and holding those to book. What do you make of that entire scene and perhaps the assessment of the leadership that came and steered this debacle forward and getting some clarity and answers?
I must say that there was some agility in the manner in which the ANC, particularly the ANC in Gauteng, responded to the shameful PPE theft and related corruption. there was a swift decision to find out what happened and to hold people accountable. And that process is still taking place, perhaps not to the satisfaction of everyone. National government also moved very swiftly. We now know, for example, all of the companies that tendered for PPEs or contracted for PPEs, because there was an immediate announcement by the president that all of that information would be made available, and Treasury made it available. But lessons that we've learned from that process is that we do need to use blockchain technologies to make these processes transparent from the word go. But secondly, we have to hold people accountable from the word go, because there's no question that there was not just corruption there, but there was also gross negligence, gross incompetence at the level of ordinary officials that are responsible for procurement. How do you procure from a company that has never done this kind of work before? Hospitals are not a new industry. They exist all the time. And all that was to be procured was multiples of ordinary things that hospitals do procure. And therefore, there was no reason to procure from dry cleaners and butcheries and things like that. So that was a lesson that was learned. But I do want to say, though, that we applaud what happened. What needs to happen, though, is to make sure that never again does such a thing happen.
Also, you know, the state capture revelations really were quite telling this year. And in your article, you touch on the temptation for unethical conduct, which is heightened during a time of adversity and uncertainty. You know, what was your sense as we learnt of the horrors during the State Capture Commission of Inquiry?
I did learn that a lot of companies that got caught up in the alleged state capture are companies that were going through some turbulences of their own. For example, if your own cash flow is low, if your shareholders are knocking at your door, and if you want to keep your foreign direct investment on board, people were prepared to take shortcuts. We know, for example, that a lot of the companies that got caught in this process are companies that excel, and therefore they don't need shortcuts to do things. But what I've learned as public protector and as somebody who does research a lot on social justice and corruption is that when people feel that the playing field is not level because of corruption, that it is the survival of the unfittest, and the unfittest being the ones who are prepared to pay, even the fit ones, the ones who would have won the tender appropriately, are tempted to pay for these contracts in order to get in. In the article, though, I'm speaking about the turbulences ahead and the turbulences that have come for companies in the face of lockdown. There will be lots of temptations to do anything to keep your business afloat. And my warning to companies is please don't get tempted, because that's like building your company on sand, on quicksand. It will look like a beautiful house, but when the storms come, when the reality hits, that whole house of cards is going to tumble down.
And very lastly, Professor Madonsela, you also mentioned that there were some wins during COVID-19. We saw a different take on the spirit of Ubuntu, and some people were able to perhaps see the opportunity within a murky time, an uncertain period.
Absolutely. I've never seen so much Ubuntu as we saw during COVID-19. People who had never been involved in any kind of charity or corporate social investments stood up and stepped up to help. We saw people running all over the country delivering food parcels to communities. Many gave people, total strangers. I gave total money to strangers, people who were just hungry. But I think the heroes are people like the Mandela Foundation, Imbumba Foundation, Sia, Kolisi, and others who literally braved the COVID-19 environment and went down there to deliver. And of course, our frontline workers, the doctors, the nurses, the security workers who check our bags when we come in, braved it. And that was amazing, Ubuntu. One of the observations I also make, though, is that those who saw opportunity in COVID-19 also made it. Those, for example, who diversified into COVID-19 or even pivoted into COVID-19 supplies did better. And those who pivoted and diversified into online trading did better. Hence, a lot of supermarkets made a kill. And overseas companies, we told now that 10 of the richest people in the world got richer. Again, it had to do with finding opportunity in adversity, which is a lesson going forward. Is firstly, how do we help businesses find opportunity in adversity? But the businesses themselves, how do people lead themselves to stop moaning about who moved my cheese and just step up and go find another piece of cheese or make new cheese?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your insight, Professor Thuli Madonsela, Professor of Law at the University of Stellenbosch.